Welcome everyone to the launch of this fabulous little book, which I've now got my paperback copy of, which is wonderful. Systems Convening, which was itself systems convened into existence. I'm Matthew Meze from the NHS and the Health Foundation's Q community of health and care improvers. It's so great that we have over 1,000 people registered for the launch from 62 countries around the globe last time I checked. Morocco, Australia, Benin, Afghanistan, Finland, Russia, really all over the world. And I know many of us have felt seen in our work, often for the first time. We felt a joy at being discovered and being given a name for what we're doing, as the book puts it. But I know lots of you are just curious too. And who knew that there were quite so many of us united by our interest in the art, or is it a science, of enabling small social miracles to take place, to use the 3 words that close the book. And as I mentioned a moment ago, it'd be great if you could share a little bit about yourself in the chat if you haven't already, who you are, where you are, why systems convening feels important to you as well. The people, just a few introductions, the people we have with us today, and you'll hear from in a moment, are the authors, Bev and Etienne, if you want to wave. I can't see if you're waving. Hopefully you're waving. And we also have some of the systems conveners who were interviewed for the book. I think those include Lorna, Pascal, Travis, Michael, Paula, Carl Davis, Caroline, Neil, Isabel, Esther. I can't look through the hundreds and hundreds of people to see. Maddie. And I think we even have a couple of the systems conveners from Surrey County Council that were recently recruited by one of the councils in the UK, which is great. We also have the 3 organisations that funded the book and did so much else to help the book happen. That's Jenny Oppenheimer from Lankelly Chase Foundation, if you want to wave. We have Shaheen and Aurora from the Centre for Public Impact. We have Ian Burbidge from the Civic Innovation Organisation, the RSA, which someone once dubbed England's fairy godmother, which I think is brilliant. We also have Benjamin Taylor from Red Quadrant, who, like me, was part of the project team, but not a funder of the book. And there was also some great, much needed proofreading by Rob Worth. So thanks to Rob, I hope he's there somewhere. The format for today is, first we're going to hear from the funding team represented by Ian. Then we're going to hear from Benjamin. Then we'll hear from Bev and Etienne about some of the key ideas in the book and why they felt it was important to write it. And after that, we're going to hear from some of the systems conveners that I just named. And we'll also be asking you in the chat what you think we could all be doing next to support systems convening, especially if it's something you can help with, because there isn't, as I need to point out, there isn't really a central organizational program behind all this. So it'd be great to take things forward, but we can't rely on an organization to do it for us. And finally, maybe the last 20 minutes or so, we're going to wrap up with an opportunity to talk to other systems conveners in breakout rooms. That will be the final bit, and you can kind of stay in them for longer if you want and carry on. We're not going to close them, I don't think. So I think if I've got things right now, I'm going to hand over to Ian from the RSA to say a little bit about why they funded the book, why it felt important on behalf of the other funders. There was a group of funders.
Thanks, Matthew.
And Shaheen and Jenny, yeah, right, okay.
Thanks, Matthew. Welcome, everyone. I've got to be honest, when we first started having conversations about this work, if someone had said we'd be launching it during a pandemic, a global pandemic, or that 1,000 people from over 60 countries would sign up to the launch, I think we'd have thought that they were crazy. And yet here we are. And I guess one of the twists of the pandemic is it offers us this space to come together, to be here from our dispersed locations, which feels so in keeping with the nature of this work. It's a pleasure to see everyone here. As Matthew says, I'm Ian Burbidge. I'm Head of Innovation and Change at the RSA. I'm here with my colleague Shaheen, who's Programme Manager at the Centre for Public Impact, and Jenny Oppenheimer, Action Inquiry Manager at Lankelly Chase. And together our 3 organisations funded Bev and Etienne's work, as Matthew says, ably supported by Matthew from the Health Foundation and Benjamin Taylor from Red Quadrant and the Public Services Transformation Academy. I think, as with so much systems convening work, this book sprung out of a conversation. Matthew reached out with the idea of supporting this research to our organizations. And it really resonated with me, with my background in local public services, where I used to convene multi-agency partnerships to tackle local issues, whether it was worklessness or trying to improve educational attainment, bringing people together from across the system. I called it partnership working. I hadn't heard of systems thinking back in those days. I certainly didn't have a label to describe my work. I found it hard to explain to my dad what I did each day, let alone justify it to my colleagues. And perhaps it's because there aren't obvious answers to that question, that standard question we ask in the West anyway. What do you do? Like, I used to dread being at a party when someone would say, what do you do? It's like, oh, what am I going to make up today? Because it's really hard to explain it when it's so varied. And for me, the research behind this book proved that I'm not alone. And perhaps that's why many of you are here today. If that's the case, welcome to Solidarity. And I think, irrespective of our reasons for being here, the fact we are all here suggests to us that something important is happening. I think it's important to say that this work started before the pandemic, but perhaps there is a recognition more sort of broadly that we do need different ways of approaching things, of trying to support people to lead fulfilling lives. Perhaps this is a moment in time when we're catching a wave where it's just like the Kairos moment, if you like. The RSA, CPI, and Lankelly Chase are connected by some core principles. The need to reimagine public services, community, and society, and how they're connected to enable us to address issues such as systemic injustice and oppression and resolve some of the most pressing and complex challenges of our time. We believe that these complexities, the complexities of the future, require a different conception of leadership. And to do that, we need to first recognize who those leaders are, who's modeling an emerging practice, and name what makes them different. And in so doing, hopefully encourage and support this way of working. Where we all see real social change happening across our work, it tends to be led by people whose incredible skills often aren't recognized and necessarily formally valued. They are people working on, as it says in the book, sustainable change across challenging silos, in complex social landscapes, and amid changing circumstances. It's the perfect way of summing up the challenge that we face, I think. But they also create, build, develop a legitimacy that comes from their deep connection to the work and their ability to bring people together and to build trust. They are systems conveners, and we think it's time we heard a bit more about their work. So I'm going to start by inviting Benjamin Taylor to share some reflections on the importance of this work based on his experience. Benjamin.
Thanks so much. And it's a tribute to how popular this is that I am in the middle of just forwarding the joining details to about 8 people who've signed up since the start of this session. So I want to say I feel very privileged. I am very privileged to have seen this book grow from seeds, I guess, planted by Beverly and Etienne. You'll hear a bit of that story at some point, and nurtured by Matthew and watered by the funders. And I want to say just 2 things. First one is, I'm passionate about the whole field of systems, cybernetics, and complexity, and its potential to really make a difference for the better. I've recently had a very mundane experience of trying to find out about social care for an elderly relative, and the incredible frustration that engendered in me just underlined for me once again why this is really important. And it is the people like you. It's just fantastic to be in a room and know that hundreds more will listen to the video of like-hearted people who actually care and recognize themselves in this and are prepared to do something about it. So it's those kind of people like you, I suspect, who are passionate, embedded, care long-term, and are willing to just do the work to make a difference. I think that you are the greatest hope for the change that we really, really need. second thing I want to say is so many of you in this call, what I have on the screen behind me is actually a Wordle you won't be able to see very much, but of the incredibly passionate, interesting, varied responses that we got for why are you coming today. People are coming because they recognize Bev and Etienne's previous work, because we've managed to get the word out, but principally because they either see themselves in it or see this as something, you know, valuable, even critical. And it's the seeing themselves in this, the sudden recognition that I think is I think something Bev and Etienne are particularly good at, and that's the power at the heart of this book. Risks come with that, of course. So this is now a label, and there's a little bit in the book acknowledging that risk. This is now a label, and you know, we can let that be a trend, a flash in the pan. You know, lots and lots of people can put systems convener on their profile on LinkedIn. Some people can recruit to it. You can see a quick discussion on Twitter, and then it could all fade away and the next fad comes along. I don't think this is about that. The label gives us power, and the label creates that risk. So I'm asking everybody here today to think about how we can take systems convening forward as a community, as individuals, as small groups, however we do it. There's no big force behind this that can kind of now sweep us all up, having named us and put us in our rightful place and let us change the world. We're going to have to do that all ourselves, with consciousness of the risk, with consciousness of the need, with consciousness of the power and the opportunity. So this is just the start of something really big, I think. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thanks, Benjamin. Fabulous. I think it's time to hear from the well, I don't know, the stars of the show, or whatever we want to call them, from Bev and Etienne themselves, to share, you know, what surprised them about writing the book. Over to you guys.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is so much surprise, but I mean, I guess it did surprise us. But what we found very moving and surprising is how important the personal experience is of the person who does this kind of work, or the team of people who are doing this kind of work. It's really very personal work. It's not just a job, although, you know, you may have a job title and you interpret your role like that. But you don't do this kind of work unless you really care about making a difference. And unless you really care about making a difference in practice. So it's not a policy difference, although it may lead to that. But the people who do this kind of work are driven, they're driven by other people seeing problems of practice and knowing that what comes out of this is going to be changes in practice. And it includes, when you do this kind of work, it includes your heart, it includes your identity, it includes who you are. All those things, you need them for your legitimacy to do the kind of work, because you're often not given formal legitimacy. You need that passion for inspiring other people, or for inspiring confidence in other people. And it was this sort of personal experience that is so important, that made us realize that when we write the book, we wanted to include portraits of the people, and we wanted the voices of the people who are doing this kind of work there, because, yeah, this is their work. And systems conveners, they often don't, I mean, they mostly don't. Very few people actually say, oh, I'm a systems convener, until they read the work, and then they can give themselves a name. But yeah, they recognize themselves in the description of the role. And yeah, so that's really, and that's the first section really of our book, is the portraits of the systems conveners, and their words to describe what it is that we're saying.
And I guess the second thing that surprised us was that as we talked with more and more people, we started to see that there is a discipline to what they are doing. There are patterns to what they're doing. And it's not a discipline that's necessarily theorized, but it's a discipline that is driven by the need to actually make the difference in practice that Bev was talking about. And so, even though they don't think about it as a discipline, our interviews really brought out the different dimensions of their work along which they apply an explicit or a tacit discipline. And so what we decided to do was to describe these different dimensions, complex set of dimensions of this difficult work, and to use quotes from our interviewees describing their experience of each of the dimensions of the work. And that became the second part of the book, which is a description of 7 dimensions of the work of systems conveners brought to life by the quotes from our interviews.
And in a way, I suppose it's a little bit repeating myself, but just to say, it really is amazing when you talk to systems conveners about the tacit assumption they have that what happens on the ground matters, that what people do in practice matters, and that people have something important to say about their experience of practice. And then systems conveners are the kind of people who create a space for those different perspectives about practice to interact and to matter to each other. But they often, I mean, that tacit assumption often bumps its head on organizational or other assumptions where the perspective of practice is often subsumed under another practice like management practice. And so the systems convener has to learn an intricate dance between the voices of practice and the voices of those people often who hold positions of power. And that dance, I mean, we put it as the discipline of power in the book, but that is a very important one that they play and that they dance.
And I would say that the third thing that I wouldn't say surprised us, but was really, it was a nice surprise, is how familiar it felt when we heard the stories of the people we were talking with, because we're not coming at this from a system theory perspective. We are coming at this from a social learning theory perspective. And the way that people talked about their work was so familiar in terms of the core elements, the core concept of social learning theory. This notion of the importance of mutual engagement to create a learning situation. The fact that learning happens when people come in as a whole person and bring who they are to the learning process. And many of our interviews were talking about identity transformation as key to the work they were doing. And this whole notion of agency, which is also a core principle in social learning theory, that learning is not simply acquiring knowledge, but gaining a sense of agency so that you can actually make a difference with what you're learning. And there again, we saw our interviewees really care about enabling agency on the part of the people they were working with. And this actually talks to what Bev was talking about, this tendency of organizational perspective to remove agency from people who do the work. And so we saw that emphasis on agency through learning with one another how to address a problem for which there is no pre-existing solution. So the last part of the book is our description of this work in the language of social learning theory, and our strong sense that what systems conveners really care to do is to enhance the social learning capability of a section of the world in which they work, and where boundaries prevent people from seeing a broader picture. And so working with these across these boundaries to enhance the learning capability of the social context in which they work seems to be a good way to capture what they were really trying to do. So that's,
and we should say,
the third
yeah,
section
we
of
should,
the book. Yeah,
that's the third section of the book. And we should say that, I mean, this is a slim book. We interviewed only 40 people. Not all of the voices came into the book, but the people we have here who are going to speak today, their voices did come into the book. But really, it's just a start. It's what we saw in this initial view. There's still so much work to do here, many more stories to tell, more cases to capture. And this is really, our book is really a first attempt at giving a language for what people do. It's definitely not a sort of definitive work on what they do. It's the first step. So I think, Matthew, it would be great now to hear from the people who were interviewed.
Yeah, shall I just call on, I can see some faces at the top of my screen. Shall I just call on some of them and see if they're ready to unmute and share a little bit about what really resonated about systems convening in their own experience, in their own lives?
Yeah, we should make sure that they all turn on their video.
Yeah, I'll any that haven't, I will ask them to. But should we start with Michael? You're the first one I can see. Do you want to just for a minute say why this resonates for you? You know, how does it fit with your experience as a convener?
Sure. So I want to congratulate Bev and Etienne for curating, a framework around what all of us do and many on this call do. So thank you, Bev and Etienne. For me, systems convening is about liberating potential. From my perspective, it's liberating potential of systems, people, practices. It's just about liberating potential. And if you have that mindset, so for me in the book, of all the practices, the one that stood out for me or resonated most is the first one, which is a convening call. When you have diverse groups, you really have to search for the sweet spot, the call that's really going to mobilize everybody's potential. And I think that's a bit of art, a bit of science, a bit of identity and legitimacy, all the other pieces. But for me, I never used the word a convening call, but I always had in my mind that what it was, but I didn't have a word for it. So I think for me, that was what resonates.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Pascal, do you want to come off mute and just say a little bit about how this resonates for you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. First, I would like to thank again Etienne and Bev for this fantastic, terrific initiative. What resonates most for me is how do we value human dignity and how we value the bonding capital to make sure that in our business and everywhere, people feel really comfortable in bringing input, making sure that we achieve our goal, we achieve our result, and what is already planned. That resonates very well for me because we are working at the community level, at the grassroots level. And you can see when you move at the community level, it's like we have hierarchy between those who has been at the university at school and those who have been living their life at the community level. How do we make sure that we come to the same level and we convene and discuss on equity basis, making sure that community aspiration is really the one who is leading, which is leading the activities, the program, the project. That resonates well for me. And thank you for such initiative. Thank you.
Thanks,
Pascal. Next on my screen is Rebecca. Do you want to come off mute and just share a bit of your experience about what resonates, Rebecca?
You are muted.
Okay. Thank you. Your name, up to now, I can't pronounce it. Is it Trainer or?
Yeah.
Thank you for your work, and thank you very much for involving me. I have a lot of surprises in my life, and what I discover in this life is that if you do something that not thinking of whether you will be noticed or not, but you are doing it just passionately to help people, then gradually your light will be shine. And this is my second shock, because the first is when my name appeared that I will go to Geneva and receive a UN award, humanitarian award. I said, me in Nigeria, what, I did not deserve it, anything. And this too, when you are doing the interview, I never thought that I will enter a book that many big people, all of them, I'm the smallest. And, but the people that I serve in Nigeria, they are still struggling. And but then the way we operate, they develop resiliency, and this is what I'm really grateful about. When you serve people, then people will be comforted, and then they will be resilient and continue living. So I read the stories of all the people that are written in the book, and they are doing marvelously wonderful work impacting life. So let us continue to do it. Thank you so much for giving me this chance, and thank you for your work.
Thank you, Rebecca. So maybe if we move from Nigeria to Yorkshire, Esther, do you want to just say a little bit about how this has resonated in your experience?
God, yeah, Nigeria to Yorkshire. Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to hear those words again in my lifetime before I say something. I mean, I was just so, first of all, gobsmacked. I think like Rebecca, like just totally surprised to be asked. And it was thanks to Matthew, who's been a real support to me from the beginning of my work, and straight through to the warmth of Bev and Etienne, which was so welcome. The warmth of how they asked the questions, of how they heard and helped me express some of the things that are quite difficult when you're not used to having those conversations. So I think you know, that kind of approach made its way through into the book, because you can hear it through the words of all the people, those kind of the base from which we've all spoken, if you like. And as I see in the chat, it feels like everyone here is speaking from the same space of warmth and heartfeltness in the work that we're doing, which is, you know, which you again you see in the book. I think what I really think is the middle of all this is that heartness. I guess all the work that I do and what I hear is unlocking what's in people's hearts. So, you know, whether that's the people in the community on the ground, or whether it's a senior leader who's, you know, making big decisions, and everyone in between, is kind of giving the opportunity for people to open their hearts and see and feel and receive what is in other people's hearts. And when we're from this place, then the rest flows. And this is not easy to achieve. It sounds easy when I'm saying these words, but I think as a foundation, this is my learning through a period of time of this work, and starting, you know, with this kind of internal feeling, and then feeling the need to hook it to sort of, I don't know, evidence-based, intellectual kind of frameworks and models, so that I can talk about it to others and influence them and make a difference. So now kind of knowing that is just a tool, and that the basis is the important thing, and that I'm kind of pulling back almost to the beginning again, not away from the models. I still use those, of course, and they're important, but coming back to what's in your heart. How can we speak to each other in that way? And that combination of knowing the frameworks and the intellectual stuff, bringing that together with what's in our hearts, that those two things together are what can really make a difference across levels. So yeah, I would just want to say thank you so much for that opportunity to hear about you guys as well, because it can be a bit of a lonely place sometimes, and that's been a real treasure. So thanks.
Thanks, Esther. Maddie, I can see you there. Do you want to share how this resonates in your experience in a minute or so?
Hi, yes. So I don't think I'm going to say anything that's not already been said, except perhaps when we had those early conversations, this was like shining a light on what I'd been doing in secret. I had been following what I knew to be right, doing what I was passionate about in order to achieve programs and transformation. But because it was hidden and it was there, it was kind of like my secret world of trying to get projects done. And I didn't have a language to be able to articulate it to others. So I almost felt like there wasn't a value on it for myself, let alone for other people, even though I knew that it was about connecting people, that following that passionate, that thing that everyone else has been talking about here in order to make things happen. And then secretly applying that to a project management framework so that it was able to get it through NHS governance and things like that. So all these conversations have kind of legitimized that for me. And seeing all these hundreds and hundreds of other people who are passionate about it in the same way is probably one of the most work-life affirming moments ever. So to all of those faces I can see here who believe in the same things that I believe in is, well, I'm welling up, so it's just absolutely and completely affirming. So thank you for making my secret life a reality in this book, and for everyone here being a part of this and sharing it too.
Thanks, Maddie. Should we go to Lorna in Dudley, I think?
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, +1 to all of the gratitude expressed by the participants for all of this beautiful work. And like Ian, I dread the question, what do you do? And then I got the draft of this from Beverly and Etienne. I was like, that's what I do. dug into it a little bit for today and just thought I'd reflect in particular on one of the areas of work, which is boundary work of systems conveners. And I was reflecting that about 10 or 15 years ago, I did quite a lot of convening across kind of institutional and departmental boundaries across sectors, public sector and voluntary and community sectors, and tried to create like a legitimacy for people to come together. So it was kind of like network events that were focused on learning and exchange, or training that I would co-design and co-deliver with people from across different parts of the system. So always trying to create that way for it to be legitimate, because I learned kind of later on that reflective practice wasn't legitimate, to step outside your boundary and do with other people. But interestingly, then my work shifted and I found myself holding boundaries and being a gatekeeper, as it were, to hold out some of the institutional behaviours and cultures that would perhaps try to appropriate, in, you know, kind of good-heartedly, but still appropriate what communities were co-creating. And now I find myself in this kind of combo space where I'm still holding that boundary, but I'm doing the thing of Bev and Etienne write about kind of creating artifacts. And I think what I've done is create a few. So like by saying we'll have a social lab, and that will be a space where people from different disciplines will come together and work together. I've recently been calling people that I convene time rebels. So it doesn't matter where you work, what your background is, you can be a time rebel if you kind of think about intergenerational justice. So that's how I'm kind of playing with boundary work at the moment. Thank you.
Lorna, should we go to Samuel? You want to come off mute and share a bit of your experience around convening?
Thank you very much, Bev and Enti. For me, the system convening, what resonates well with me, that the component of enhanced social learning capabilities. You know, sometimes in this development work that we're in, sometimes we feel when we're doing certain activities to develop a certain community that we feel they are less privileged. We've done our level best, especially in the conventional or traditional way of doing development. But I come to learn that in the past, when I look back to where I'm coming from with the NGO world experience, there are certain things I feel if I had known this, I would have changed that at that particular time, and this community were going to be better than the way it is. So you look at sometimes we go in the community and feel like the community doesn't know anything, and we have to lead the process for them to develop. But when you sit down with these communities, local people at the center of the development, you will discover that when you just sit down with them, you can even develop a project proposal out of what they are going to say. And from what they're going to say, if you really bring that, they lead the process of development, we are able to attain the sustainable development that we always look for, which can lead to self-reliance in the communities. So the book really helps to show how we can continue learning and how we can also continue interacting with the other civil society organizations and also the government to ensure that the real sustainable development that we always desire to see at the community level is achieved. So this book really helps me to understand and unlocks certain thinking that I had. So, oh, actually, even up to at this moment, I can still think of what other methods can we do better than what we're doing now to ensure that we get the best desired development for the community. So the key issue now is that if we leave the community to lead the process of development, I can assure the team that we'll be able to see the community developing in a sustainable way that leads to self-reliance. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Samuel. Should we go to Caroline?
Yeah, thank you. A bit like Madeline, one of the most exciting things about being here, and thank you, Etienne and Bev, is that 1,000 people signed up. So I think we're very often told that what we're doing and how we're doing is unusual, out of the ordinary, challenging, frustrating, and possibly just wrong. And to suddenly see that this is now having resonance is really heartening. I work in human rights, and in particular in human rights in production factories. And so I actually assumed when I got on the call that I'd want to talk about convening, but I think nobody could put it better than Michael already did. And I think the call really, really matters. I have to do boundaries. And I was thinking perhaps the largest hurdle that we have is power. Power gives itself the permission to ignore and not understand and not see how others feel to such a point that you can actually ask them, and how does the worker feel? How did somebody feel then? And they say, well, I didn't ask because they don't matter. And actually they are the productive capacity of a factory. So even at the most inhuman level, it still matters. If you then want to get human, and we work a lot with empathy and breaking down the boundaries around identity, when people start to understand that everybody in a factory is a person and that people respond like people in terms of motivation, in terms of what that does for producing, but also in terms of making a factory a kinder place to work. So you can start to really shift the dynamics in such a way that the work is done differently. There's a different heart that is brought to it, and there's a different amount of information, because it's very seldom that power believes that there's a lot of information they don't have already have access to. And as they start to see that people who they consider at the bottom and maybe not really people have ideas for how things can be done better, have invented things which they then hide from management because they're afraid they'll get punished for it, that allows them to do things much better in a superior fashion. As they start to learn that, you can see that the boundaries break down, the sense of identity of what does it mean to be an effective manager. The day they learn it doesn't require you to yell. Yelling, just because all managers you know have yelled doesn't mean that you, to be a good manager, also need to yell. These they sound perhaps trivial, they're actually completely transformational. And so I've been a huge believer that if we can bring the system together to see itself, you can actually start to evolve the system in such a way that it can evolve itself. And to me, now having the name for it and also having all the parts teased out, I'm a lumper, so I tend to see everything in a system is all together, and everything, of course, is linked. And it's lovely to have the analytical power to have teased out all the parts and to name them and to help me see what is it that I do, what is it that I don't do that probably I ought, where can I focus? And then it's also really, really exciting and very, very humbling to see all the other system conveners. So hats off to everybody who's doing extraordinary work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline. Should we go over to Carl now? Carl Davis.
Hi. Yeah, I think everything resonated with me in this book, and so many really nice insights in both the book and today, and privileged to feel part of that. So thanks to Matthew, Bev and Etienne for including me. I think like Caroline said, if I was to pick one, it would be dealing with power. I totally agree with Bev and Etienne earlier, saying that this is driven, certainly for me, by desire to do what's right rather than potentially what might be expected at times. And that's about what matters for me. That is not one part of the system and that one part of the system working well, but really the reason that system exists in the first place, which in my case, in the NHS, is the patient. So I think what we're really trying to do is impart and exert a totally different influence on the system than the system is perhaps set up to receive. So sometimes you can feel quite countercultural. You can feel that that's quite pressured, and the systems themselves are pressured. They need collaboration and difficult conversations and trust and openness more than ever. Yet sometimes that feels like it's the most alien or the least supported approach because of the structures, the processes, the policies that we've got in place. And it feels to me that if we want real sort of sustainable improvement, we need acceptance that this is complex and messy. We've got to work across boundaries. We've got to join things up that might make the challenge more difficult, but actually are the things that are worthwhile doing. So I find that as much as we're trying to bring people together horizontally, what we're also trying to do is is fundamentally shift the way we govern systems and lead change vertically. And often when we're not set up to do that, that feels difficult, feels personally challenging. You feel invisible, and it's really nice to feel part of a movement that seems to resonate with people and show that's a shared lived experience as well.
Thanks, Carl. Fabulous. Let's move on. Maybe, as we're running a little bit towards the end of time, maybe try and keep it to a minute if you can, just so we've got time for the kind of breakouts as well. Paula, I can't see your face, but I know.
Yes, thank you. I'm here. Do you see me? Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you all for the amazing work you are doing. Thank you, Bev and Etienne, for having me in this project. When I was invited, as many of you, I said, why me? I do not do anything special. The area and the context where I work as a researcher and activist in Brazil in the field of transparency and accountability in public administration and civil society. This field involves, the system involves a lot of learning and improvements, but also a lot of failure and frustration. And well, I trusted the judgment of Bev and Etienne and the wisdom of my colleague, Florencia Garzovich, who first observed our work could be connected to this approach of systems convening. And now seeing the book and the work of amazing people like you, I'm able to see my work and the work of many people around me in a different way with a new perspective. So having this name, this concept, make it possible to see details I was not able to see before. And now what is happening in the last weeks, and when talking with people in many meetings, interactions, I see what they do. And I think, oh, I know what you are doing. I will send you a link for a book and we'll be able to see you are also a systems convener. So I can see in my work and I see in the work of others all the time. So in some way, being part of this community now, this community of learning, give me encouragement for continuing the work, which is many times hard. We do not always see the results clearly. And at the same time, I'm feeling more responsible now. I have more responsibility. And well, I hope we are able to use this power to do something better and help others to see they are also systems conveners. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Over to another convener, Travis. I think Travis is there. I've never seen Travis before, but are you there, Travis?
Yep. Hi, everyone.
Go for it.
It's just been so nice to sit and listen to what everyone has to say, and every thought and story has given me a different thing to think about. So one thing to share just is that what I love about this is that it allows us to frame what we're doing in the positive rather than saying we're not doing something else. And I think that's been inherent to my work doing university community partnership building, to say, it was easier for me in the past to say, well, I'm not brokering, or I don't want to be the gatekeeper, things like that. And to be able to use the language of system convening positively to say, this is the nature of this kind of work. This is why we're doing it this way. And for others that are involved to say, well, you can take elements of this and bring it into your own work, whether it's in municipal government or in a library or an activist group, whatever it might be. So it just feels great to have positive language to discuss what we're all trying to do. And it's just great to be part of this. So thank you, everyone. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Travis. Isabel, I think you're there. Try and keep it quite short and we could get to the breakouts and the chat forum and things. Are you there, Isabel? Want to come off mute? Maybe you're not there. You were there. Neil. Don't think. Are you there?
Hello
Neil?
there. Yes, hello.
Go
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, brilliant.
Oh, do you want to?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Bev. Hi, Etienne. Yeah, thanks for including me in this book. It's been a great experience. I've been involved with what you might call systems convening for over 20 years, trying to tackle a complex global problem, which is to improve the availability and use of reliable healthcare. And this book and this thinking makes me realize that all our global complex problems require systems convening in order to solve them. I'd like to also just say, in particular in relation to my work, I am convinced that the approach of communities of practice, which of course is something that's very much part of Bev and Etienne's work over the past decades, I really feel that we're at the cusp of something very important where we can use communities of practice much more effectively than we are at the moment, and much more inclusively and more systematically to help bring people's different perspectives together. So that's what I'm really looking forward to over the next 10 years. I want to see more investment in virtual communities of practice. HIFA is an example, Healthcare Information for All. We have 20,000 members across the world. We run on a shoestring, but it's just amazing what you can do with an internet connection. And now so many of us are connected. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I think we'll move on. I don't think there are any more interviewees waiting, but we're running a bit late. I don't know.
Well, I think now people can understand why we were so inspired to write this book. You know, after interviewing all these people.
Yeah, I'd really like to say thank you all for coming here, the hundreds of you that could join, to Bev and Etienne, of course, to the funders, to everyone who's been involved, really, the interviewees. You will hear in the email, the follow-up email, you'll get the link to the group's account, the Twitter, and the transcript and things I was mentioning. So thanks again to everyone.